Hey guys, and welcome to Gwent. I was fortunate enough to gain access to the Gwent PTR for open beta, and so today I want to showcase for you guys the new cards that are coming to Gwent on Wednesday with the open beta. Now, bear in mind, this is the PTR, so the numbers, strength values, for example, and abilities of these cards may change in terms of their specific numeric values, but I don't expect the abilities themselves to change. With that said, they've also changed the terminology a little bit, so unless stated otherwise, cards do not affect gold cards. So, if something says weaken, and it doesn't say including golds, you can't weaken gold cards with it. It will specify if there's limits to that, basically. So if it only affects bronzes or only affects silvers, it will be stated on the card, basically. And if it affects golds at all, it will be stated on the card. So the first cards I want to talk about are card changes which have caused other cards to be created, basically. So, for example, Giels is no longer a leader. He is now a 2-strength gold monsters card, and when you deploy him, you draw a gold card and a silver card, and you play one and then return the other to the top of your deck. So what's interesting about him here is, first and foremost, he's kind of like Priscilla in a way, in that you get 2 cards and you get a choice. But what's more interesting is it's a gold or a silver, so you can use him to target draw golds or target draw silvers. And then the other thing is that the other one goes to the top of your deck, so you know then that your next draw will either be that gold card or that silver card. So it's a very interesting tactical card, and I think it's a really fun card to play, especially if you need to target draw specific golds. But with that, obviously, we have the Unseen Elder now as a new leader, because otherwise monsters would be short one leader. Now, as I mentioned in my open beta changes video, leaders are now playable units, so Unseen Elder is a 4-strength unit that basically has the same effect as KAYRAN had. You consume 3 allies, but you strengthen the Unseen Elder by the power of those units instead of boosting it. So he absorbs their strength and his base strength increases. So it's a triple consume effect. So you must be asking, what happened to KAYRAN? Well, KAYRAN is now a 10-strength unit. And when you play KAYRAN, you consume a unit from your hand, but you also boost his strength by an extra 8. So you get the consume effect plus the strength of the unit from your hand plus 8. And this actually originally on the PTR was plus 5, but they've clearly buffed it, because I didn't think plus 5 was enough. Like, a gold card where you get a consume effect and you gain 5 strength isn't that great when there's so many other good consume cards. So they've tweaked him up a little bit. Now, the next card we've seen changes to is Saskia. So Saskia used to be a dragon, where you would debuff all of your opponents by 1 and buff all of your units by 1, effectively. Now she is a 7-strength Scoia'tael card, golden card, and she has the ability Orders. Now, Orders trigger when you play your leader ability. So with Saskia, the Orders are that she gets summoned to a random row when you use your leader ability. So this basically just gives your leader an extra 7 strength in its play. You just stick her back in the deck, so you want to mulligan her away, stick her back in the deck, and then when you use your leader ability, it's an extra 7 strength, which means that your leader ability is a bit more of a power swing. And it's one of those kind of bigger plays where you try to give yourself point advantage and try and force card advantage away from your opponent. That's kind of what it's there for. And the thing is, because we now have mulligans in the 2nd and 3rd round as well, she's quite a safe play, because if you draw her in the 2nd round or 3rd round, if you haven't used your leader ability yet, that's fine, because you can just mulligan her back in and then, play her, draw her when you use your leader ability. With that said, what happened to Saskia the Dragon? Well, Saskia the Dragon is now ARETUZA. I've probably said this wrong. You guys always call me out when I say things wrong. It's because I keep calling Geralt Gerald to annoy you guys. This is the thing that I do. But ARETUZA is a 6-strength gold Scoia'tael card, and when you play her, you boost yourself by 1 for each dwarf ally, including gold. So this was the including golds thing I talked about at the start of the video. If a card affects gold units, it will specifically say it on the card. Whereas if it doesn't affect gold units, it just doesn't say anything. So you boost yourself by 1 for each ally dwarf, and you damage an enemy by 1 for each ally elf, and that's including golds as well. So allies are units that you've played onto the board. So if you've got lots of dwarfs on the board, you'll buffer up a lot, and if you've got lots of elves on the board, you'll do a lot of damage. But I'm not convinced this is that useful, because the way I see it, you'll usually focus your deck around either dwarfs or elves. You never really use both. So either she's, a bit more than 6 strength. Like, how many dwarfs are you realistically going to have? So she's a bit more than 6 strength, which, there's a lot of other better golds out there that, are worth a lot more points than this. Alternatively, she's 6 strength and a bit of damage, like Triss, I guess. So, again, and Tristan you just don't see play because there's, again, better gold. So, I think Saskia is quite interesting, but SASKIA, I'm not sure if she's going to see play. Now, the next type of new card I want to talk about are summoned cards. So, these are cards that were previously summoned by other cards, but are now playable themselves. Now, the first one is a bit complicated because previously we had the Golem, and when it died, it would spawn lesser Golems. But Golem and lesser Golems are no more. Now, the lesser Golem is now an Imperial Golem, which is a 3-strength Nilfgaard unit with the Orders ability, which we showed with Saskia. So when you play your leader ability, you'll summon a 3-strength Imperial Golem. And you have 3 of them in your deck because they're bronze, you'll summon 3. So you got an extra 9 strength on your leader ability there, which is a big swing. It takes 3 deck slots, though. And then the Golem has actually become Summoning Circles. This is a whole brand new card, which is really exciting. You spawn a base copy of the last enemy the opponent played from their hand, and this is a silver card, and it's a neutral card, so you can play it in any deck. I think it's an interesting mechanic. You get a copy of the last card your enemy played. Obviously not golds, it doesn't say including golds, but that can be silvers or it can be bronzes. So this is kind of a silver where you get to play either an enemy bronze or a silver. I don't know how useful this is going to be. I feel like if you wanted to play a silver, you would tech that silver into your deck rather than playing Summoning Circle, although it does let you take silvers from, you know, other factions. It lets you use cards from other factions. I'm just wondering, you know, exactly how useful this card is going to be. So next up we have Chort. Chort is now a playable card. It is a 6-strength bronze unit, and when you deploy it, it has the Brave ability. Brave is if you're losing, this thing triggers. So if you're losing, you strengthen it by 4, so it becomes a 10-strength unit rather than a 6-strength unit. And you'll be asking, you know, what happened to Prize-Winning Cow? Well, Prize-Winning Cow is now a 2 HP silver card with Retaliation, spawn a Chort, and Death Wish, spawn a Chort. So when the unit dies, it spawns a Chort, same as previously. But now if the unit gets damaged, it spawns a Chort. And you might think, well, you know, damage is going to kill it. It's only got 2 health. But what you can do is buff the Prize-Winning Cow above 2 health. And then whenever it takes damage that weakens it but doesn't kill it, it then spawns a Chort. And I can see this potentially being very good in Skellige decks. This is one where I'm thinking the self-harming Skellige decks could be huge. Because effectively, if you keep buffing and damaging your Chort, not your Chort, sorry, your cow, I imagine it would keep summoning Chorts based on the description of Retaliation. This one is like remains to be seen. Obviously, it's something they have to play around with. But I think Prize-Winning Cow could be very interesting. Chort is, you know, I don't know, it's a bit of a boring card. But the Prize-Winning Cow itself, I think, is potentially going to be really, really big. Next, we have the Commando Neophyte. So, Isengrim no longer summons Commando Neophytes. Commando Neophytes are a 5-strength Squirtel card with 2 armor. And whenever you mulligan a card, they damage a random enemy by 2. So this is kind of like the Mangonel of Squirtel. So instead of, you know, revealing cards, you're mulliganing cards and dealing 2 damage. That's effectively how I see it. And clearly there's going to be a mulliganing archetype in Squirtel. Now, Isengrim is now a 7-strength gold card, which causes you to play an ambush card, so a face-down card, effectively. And I don't know, this is not the most interesting of cards to me. I think it's a bit of a boring card compared to what it used to do. But the question here is, it says play an ambush card. Do you get to pick that ambush card? It's not that clear. There are other cards which say play an X card and then shuffle the rest back into your deck, which suggests that you get to choose from your deck, whereas this one just says play, so I don't know if it's random or not. That is, again, something that we need to kind of look into. So, next up, we have the Bloody Baron. The Bloody Baron, everyone. The Bloody Baron. The Bloody Baron is a 4-strength Northern Realm card now, a gold card. And at the end of the round, if the unit is in your deck, it's moved to the top of your deck. So it's a card that you can mulligan away, and then at the end of the round, it'll come to the top of your deck. And if you draw it then, and you don't want to use it that round, you can mulligan it again, and it'll come back to the top for the 3rd round. So that's kind of what happens with the Bloody Baron. But effectively, while he's in your deck, he boosts his strength by 1 for every enemy that you destroy, and then he damages himself by 1 for every ally that gets destroyed. So effectively, he becomes stronger the more of the enemy's cards you kill, and becomes weaker the more of your own cards that they kill. And I feel like this is like a card that would be really useful in a control deck, an aggressive control deck, where you're just taking out all of your opponent's cards. If you're just destroying all of your opponent's cards, Bloody Baron becomes very strong, and then you don't have to worry about the chance that you draw him because he moves to the top of your deck. So it's a very interesting mechanic, but it remains to be seen how strong it's going to be as we move into the open beta meta. With that said, he no longer spawns botchlings or lubbakins. So what's happened to them? Well, a botchling is now a 5 strength silver, and when you play it, you boost all lubbakins in your hand, deck, and graveyard by 5. So boost any other lubbakins and botchlings that you might have by 5. So this is kind of an interesting card when you think of Operator, which can duplicate a card, because you can get an extra botchling or an extra lubbakin. And then his Death Wish is that you summon a lubbakin. So summon is when you draw a card from your deck. So you play the botchling, and then when it dies, it pulls the lubbakin from your deck, but the lubbakin then has 10 health, right? And then with the botchling, if you've operated the botchling, you'll then have a second botchling, which you can then play, and then that boosts your lubbakin by another 5. Or basically, there's kind of interactions here with resurrecting and botchlings and lubbakins. And it's kind of an interesting tactic, and I definitely want to play around with this kind of lubbakin, botchling, resurrection strategy in Northern Realms, because obviously we do have some resurrection in Northern Realms, like Shani, for example. Anyway, next up, we have Margarita. Margarita's actually become really boring. Previously, whenever you turned a card golden, she would summon an ARETUZA Adept, but they basically removed the ability to turn cards golden in the game. Like, Promote is no more, for example. Hensel has been changed. So she no longer has that ability. Instead, she's a 4 strength Northern Realm silver. When you deploy her, she resets or toggles a lock. So you turn a locked card on or off. Like I say, a bit dull. So what happened to the ARETUZA Adept? Well, ARETUZA Adept is now a 4 strength Northern Realms unit. And when you play her, she will play a random bronze weather card from your deck. So you can play weather and you can lock. These cards have become a bit dull, in my personal opinion. Not as cool as their previous mechanics, but, you know, you can't have every card be amazing. So next up, we have Regis. Now, Regis previously was, I believe, an 8 strength golden card. And then when he died, he spawned a 10 strength silver card. So it was basically kind of like putting points on the board for the next round. You played your golden Regis, and on the next round you get a 10 strength silver. Now he's an 8 strength gold card, and he has a 2-turn timer. And then at the end of the 2-turn timer, he will boost himself by 7 if you're winning. So you play him, and then 2 turns later, if you have the most points, you gain another 7, so you gain 15. So it really puts pressure on your opponent to keep up with your tempo. And this is a neutral card, obviously. And the thing is with Regis, you could obviously play out Regis, and then if you're running, say, Saskia, or the Imperial Golems for Nilfgaard, you can then use your leader ability and put a lot of pressure on your opponent for a round. It's a lot of points in, you know, a few moves, which then puts pressure on your opponent to catch you up, because if they don't catch you up, then you then gain another 7 points, and then they could end up at card advantage. So it's a strategy I would imagine is around kind of getting a lot of points on the board. Crones, for example, would work quite well with this as well. Getting a lot of points on the board and then passing, and just using that strategy to win a round. So now, Regis Higher Vampire is a 6 strength neutral card, and when you play him, he consumes a random bronze from your opponent's deck. So he eats up one of your opponent's bronze cards. And this is a neutral card, but I can typically see it being played in a consume deck in monsters. And it's really playing into the Unseen Elder kind of deck archetype. I don't know how much you'll see it played in non-consume decks, so non-monster decks, but I think it fits quite nicely into the monster archetype. So then we have the Wild Hunt Hound, which is a 5 strength 2 armor bronze card. And when you play this, it will summon Frost from your deck. So it pulls the Frost card out of your deck, basically. You can use it to target draw Frost, and then that plays the Frost on the enemy's row, so the opposite row. And Frost now can go on any row. There have been some weather changes. I'll have a weather changes video coming up today to keep you up to date with all of those, so keep an eye out for that. But it basically deals damage to all units on the row each turn by 1. So it does 1 damage each turn to every unit on the row. And I think Wild Hunt Hound is going to be pretty good in weather decks. So what does CARANTHIR do? Well, CARANTHIR is now a 5 strength monster golden card, and it's kind of similar to the Wild Hunt Hound in that when you play him, you move 5 enemies to this unit's row on your opponent's side. So if you play him on the middle row, 5 of your opponent's enemies can be moved to the middle row, and then you apply Biting Frost to that row. So previously Wild Hunt Hound was Summon Frost, which pulls it from your deck, but CARANTHIR is Apply, so this is an extra Frost. So similar to Wild Hunt Hound, but obviously a bit stronger because it is a gold card. And again, I think it's going to be a staple in Monster Weather. So next up we have the most interesting change to summoned cards, and that is Gauntro, Dim, and Shadow. So the Shadow is now a 4 strength silver card, where when you play it, it triggers the Death Wish of 3 units to the right, and it's a monsters only card. So you can basically play a bunch of cards with Death Wishes with things that trigger when they die. and then used Shadow to trigger them. So there is definitely some kind of Death Wish synergy going on with Shadow. Meanwhile, Gauntero Dim is a neutral card, and he is a 5 strength card, and he has this really cool ability where basically you gamble with the Man of Glass. Success, you draw and play a card and then shuffle the rest back to your deck, so it's targeted draw. You fail, your opponent draws a card, and if you tie, both players draw a card. And basically you have to bet on whether the top card in your opponent's deck, including gold cards, is stronger than 5 strength or weaker than 5 strength. So if it's stronger and you guess stronger, you win. If it's stronger and you guess weaker, you lose. If it's the same, then you tie, for example. And this is a really interesting card because in worst case scenario, you gain 5 points and your opponent gains a card, which is definitely a win for them. But best case scenario, you get 5 points and you get to play another card of your choice. So it's a big risk. Sorry, a big reward, but not that big of a risk, I would say, although it is obviously a risk. And if you tie, then you both get a card, so you gained 5 points. Ultimately, you benefited. So I think it's really interesting, and I can't wait to see how this card is used in tournaments, potentially. You know, where this card shows up and how kind of it swings things. I know a lot of people don't like RNG, but I think this is a really interesting card. I mean, let me know what you guys think of this card in the comments below. So last but not least, we have cards that are just brand new cards. So these are maybe the most exciting cards that you're going to see in this video. And I'm going to start with the bronzes and then move my way up towards the golds. So first and foremost, we have the IVICOVARO Novice. This is a 2-strength Nilfgaard card where when you play this, you trigger the ability of a spying enemy, ambassador, or emissary. So you need, I guess, ambassadors or emissaries, which do the same thing as in current patch Gwent. So the emissary draws 2 bronze cards and you pick one, and the ambassador buffs one of your other cards. And basically you can use the novice to trigger that effect again. Now, I'm not really rating this card because the way I see it, it's too conditional. You need to have an ambassador or an emissary out in order to do this. And then you're just gaining strength to trigger the ability again, when normally what people would just do is put, 3 emissaries in their deck. And 3 emissaries is usually enough to cycle through all of your bronze cards. So I'm not entirely sure how the IVICOVARO Novice is going to be used personally. Next up, we have the Wild Hunt Navigator. This is a 3-strength monsters card. And when you deploy him, he summons a copy of a Wild Hunt ally. So you need to have other Wild Hunt units on the board, and then when you play the Navigator, you can draw another one. And this, I guess, plays into kind of a Wild Hunt theme. There are cards, labeled with Wild Hunt. I'm not entirely sure exactly how Wild Hunt is going to play out. I've kind of looked through the Wild Hunt cards on PTR, and I still feel like it's not quite an archetype that the devs want it to be. They want, I guess, monsters to have Wild Hunt, Consume, and Weather. But Wild Hunt still doesn't feel that fleshed out, but we do have a new Wild Hunt card. So next up, we have a Northern Realms new bronze card. And this is probably the most boring card that they've added. This is an 8-strength bronze card with 3 armor. Now, I know it's going to play into Northern Realms armor synergies, because armor seems to be a new archetype in Northern Realms. And the fact that it has armor will probably play into kind of synergies with other cards. But in and of itself, this card is kind of boring. So next up, we have a new Scoia'tael bronze card, and that is the Dol BLATHANNA Protector. This is a 4-strength bronze card. Whenever you play a special card, boost self by 1 wherever it is. So wherever the Protector is in your deck, whether it's in your deck, your graveyard, or your hand, it gets boosted by 1 whenever you play a special card. So this is clearly tying into a special card synergy and a special card archetype that they want to keep in Scoia'tael. And I think it's an interesting card, in that obviously the more special cards you play, the more points you get. But if you overly stack your deck with special cards, then you don't typically have enough strength to win the game. So there's clearly a balance going on here. And it's nice to see that even though cards like Isengrim, for example, have been changed, they're still keeping the special card synergy. So next up, we have the BLOODCURDLING Roar. This is a bronze neutral card, and when you play this special card, you destroy an ally, so a card that you've already played, and you spawn a bear, and the bear has 12 strength. And this is a card I can definitely see played in Skellige. Now, Skellige, you have your 1-strength Priestess of Freya, which resurrects a bronze unit. So basically, you resurrect a bronze unit, and then you can then use the BLOODCURDLING Roar to kill the Priestess of Freya and gain 12 strength effectively. So you're trading at 1 strength for 12, which is really big on a bronze card. There's the condition that you have to have a unit on the board, but provided you're running a deck that has typically weak units, there's definitely value in this. There's clearly some kind of synergies, and especially in Skellige that I see this card being useful, but this is a card that I think you'll see in quite a few decks, especially as it is a bronze. So that does it for the bronze cards. What that means is that every faction got a new bronze card except for Skellige, but you know, it is what it is. So now we're moving on to the silvers, and the first one I want to talk to you guys about is Jotun. Jotun is a 6 strength monsters silver card, and when you play Jotun, you move 3 adjacent enemies to the units row on your opponent's side, and then you damage them by 2. So you move 3 units to the same row as the Jotun and deal 2 damage. So you gain the strength of the Jotun, and then you move units to a row, which potentially, because it's monsters, you'll have applied weather to, and then you also deal damage. So I feel like, again, this is a card that you're going to see in a lot of weather decks, and I think it's a pretty decent silver card. So next up we have Necromancy, and Necromancy is a special card, a neutral special card, and this card, you banish a unit from either graveyard and you give its power to your highest unit. So this is basically giving anybody the ability to remove cards from graveyards. So if you're worried about specific resurrects, for example, Necromancy is your friend. But in doing so, you then also give its power to your strongest unit. But the risk there is obviously, if you're giving the power to the strongest unit, you're making that unit even stronger, which makes it a target for things like Scorch or Igni. So there is kind of a risk-reward going on here with Necromancy. And I'm not entirely sure, you know, how much it's going to be played. As it's just a silver, it takes up a silver slot. You know, that's the kind of question that we have to ask. So next up, we have the Guardian. And the Guardian is an 8 strength Nilfgaard silver card. And it has the Death Wish, spawn 2 Lesser Guardians at the top of your opponent's deck. Now, Lesser Guardians are 6 strength silver cards. So you give your opponent 2 6 strength silver cards, but you also kind of dilute their deck. So the objective, I guess, there is to, you know, cause trouble for your opponent by effectively giving them crappy cards to draw. They then have to mulligan those cards if they don't want them. If they're trying to, you know, target draw silvers, it's kind of bloating their deck with silvers. I don't know. I don't know exactly how the Guardian is going to work out. I think, like, 6 strength is still, you know, it's not necessarily a terrible card. So giving them that option, I don't think is necessarily terrible. I guess the idea is that you just kind of dilute your opponent's deck. So we'll kind of see. And 8 strength on the board is nice. I just don't know if the effect is that useful because the cards that you give to your opponent aren't that bad. And last but not least, we have marching orders. So if you were watching the live stream, you'll know that King of Beggars has been changed. But fear not, because he still kind of exists in the card Marching Orders. Marching Orders is now it's a silver neutral special card. So whilst King of Beggars was a playable unit, Marching Orders is silver, which means it can't be resurrected. But it will have interesting synergies in Scoia'tael, which obviously do have some special card synergies. And effectively what it does is it plays the lowest unit in your deck and it strengthens it by 2. So it plays your lowest unit and it gains 2 strength. So this is the target drawing of that lowest unit that we had previously in King of Beggars, but it's now been transferred to a special card. And I'm happy to see this return because I did really like King of Beggars as a card, and I think Marching Orders definitely will see some play. So now we're moving on to our gold cards, and I'm going to show you guys Leo Bonhart. Leo Bonhart is a 6 strength Nilfgaard card. And when you play him, you reveal a unit in your hand, including golds. So you can reveal a gold card to your opponent. And then you damage an enemy by the revealed unit's power. So this is a situation where you're basically dealing damage and gaining strength. But you have to reveal a card. But it's got reveal synergies. Because obviously in Nilfgaard, when you reveal a card, that's not necessarily a bad thing for you. And if you reveal a strong unit, then you've got a lot of damage. So you've got removal, you've got strength, and you've got reveal triggers, because obviously Nilfgaard will have, reveal synergy. So I think Leo Bonhart is a really interesting card, and I think Nilfgaard reveal is going to be a really interesting deck strategy. So next up we have Rain Fawn. Rain Fawn is a 6 strength Nilfgaard card, and when you play him, you play a disloyal unit from your deck and you shuffle the others back. So this is where I was kind of a bit confused in comparison with this card and with Isengrim, because Isengrim says play an ambush card, but it doesn't say shuffle the others back, whereas Rain Fawn says play a disloyal unit from your deck, shuffle the others back, which suggests you get to choose. So I'm not entirely sure what's happening with Isengrim and what's happening with Rain Fawn. There's obviously a little bit of disparity in the card texts, but effectively this is target drawing for your disloyal units. You get 6 strength and you get target draw, and I always find that target draw really can be quite useful. So with Rain Fawn, potentially could be really big in spying decks, and it's showing that, you know, spying is definitely still an archetype that's playable in Nilfgaard, or at least that CDPR wants to be playable in Nilfgaard. So it kind of remains to be seen exactly how this card's going to fit into the meta. So next up we have Royal Decree. This is a neutral special card. Play a gold card from your deck, shuffle the others back. So again, there's that, you know, shuffle the others back text that wasn't on Isengrim. But effectively what this does is it's just targeted draw for a gold card. So this is the kind of card where if your deck strategy is very reliant on a specific gold card, then Royal Decree is, you know, probably a card that you would use. But bear in mind, it does take up a deck slot. So it does take up a deck slot, and that's maybe its downside, is that it's a gold card. You get one fewer gold cards for this. But if you really, really need a specific gold card, I guess this is a card that you would play. I'm not 100% sold personally. I think it's another one that kind of time will tell on. But let me know what you guys think about Royal Decree. I just feel like it doesn't do enough for the fact that it's taking up one of your gold slots. Now, something that I think is very decent for taking up one of your gold slots is Drought, the neutral special card. And this is a new weather effect, and this is something that's really exciting about weather, and I'll cover it in my new weather video. But Drought is a special weather effect, and you apply Drought to all the rows on your opponent's side, and then at the start of the turn, it weakens the units on the row by 1. So you're effectively each turn weakening every single one of your opponent's cards by 1. And this seems very, very strong, and this is why you've seen a lot of people saying that weather seems, you know, overpowered at the moment. And I will go into more detail about this in my weather video. But needless to say, this is a very interesting new gold card. Now, last but not least, we have a Skellige card. I knew there was going to be at least one. I kind of saved this one for you Skellige people who are watching this thinking, oh my god, where are the Skellige cards? We have VARJORN, and this is a doozy of a Skellige card. So this is going to be tying into that, you know, damaging archetype where you damage your opponent and you kind of damage yourself and all those kind of different damage synergies. Because at the end of the turn, any enemy with 2 or less power gets damaged by 2, so it gets killed. So effectively, if you keep weakening your opponent, then by the time you get them down to 2 power or less, they're going to then be killed. And then we saw Drought just previously, which obviously, you know, applies Drought to every row and weakens your opponent by 1. So there's clearly synergies going on here with damage. And the fact that that's a neutral card, and, you know, Skellige, it does have cards which, you know, get buffed by your opponents taking damage, for example. VARJORN could be potentially, you know, lethal, and then you're killing loads of your opponent's cards, and that's kind of crazy. So this is a really interesting card because it's only 6 power, but it has the potential to do so much removal. And, you know, with cards like Lacerate, for example, where you're dealing 3 damage to all cards on the row, with VARJORN, you can then basically up that to killing units if you can get them down to 2 strength. And also with cards like Yennefer as well, Yennefer Conjurer, for example, there's a lot of interesting synergies going on in Skellige. And I think Skellige will be really kind of fun to play. Although obviously we need to look into all the other cards. There may have been tweaks to cards like Lacerate or the Axeman that gets buffed every time you deal damage. So that kind of remains to be seen as we move into the meta. But these are the new cards anyway. And you can see that a lot of different factions have been fleshed out a bit. And there are definitely some new interesting cards coming in, not least the weather changes, which I will have another video going up for you guys today, going over the weather changes so you can see those. So keep an eye out for that. But if you've liked this video, hit that thumbs up button. Let me know what your favorite new card was, what your least favorite new card was, what you think of the new cards in the comments below. And hopefully I will catch you guys next time in the next video. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching. Bye.